Well, some encounters seem accidental, but in truth, they are psychological destiny. One day, you meet someone, the one who makes your heart ignite, the one your soul swears it has known from another lifetime. But that light doesn't come to bring happiness. It comes to reveal what you've forgotten, the part of your shadow that has never been seen. Carl Jung once said, "The attraction between two poles is the language of the unconscious." As it, light is always drawn toward darkness, not to be devoured, but to recognize itself. The empath and the narcissist meet like two hemispheres of the same soul, one embodying unguarded light, the other an unhealed darkness. Between them lies not just love, but an archetypal magnetism, like two poles of a single spiritual field. You, the empath, carry within you the light of compassion, the ability to feel what others cannot say. They, the narcissist, carry within them a hollow void where every light that enters is reflected back as illusion. Yet in that first moment, you don't see the darkness. You see only your own light, magnified, radiant, perfect. They make you believe you have been seen, chosen, understood. You don't realize that what you are seeing is your own soul, reflected in their mirror. Jung called this moment the meeting of persona and shadow, where the self adorned in light meets the self that has been denied. And thus, the journey begins. They enter your life like dawn, warm, gentle, full of promise. But that dawn is not real. It is the light of the persona, the mask they wear to be loved. And you, the empath, have spent your whole life trying to see the good in everyone, believing in redemption, believing that if you love deeply enough, you can heal anyone. You do not know that this very belief will become the doorway through which darkness enters. Because when light gazes into darkness, darkness gazes back. And from that moment, neither of you will ever be the same. This attraction is not about the other person. It is about the unlived part of you. You are called not to love, but to awaken. It is the soul's first contract, a covenant between two wounds seeking the way home. In the beginning, everything feels magical. You laugh more. You feel seen, heard, alive. But beneath the surface, the unconscious begins its work. Polar energies start to merge like water and fire, light and shadow seeking balance. You do not yet realize that in this game, the one who sees deepest is the one who hurts first. Because the empath sees through illusion, yet forgets they are part of it too. Love becomes a labyrinth. Light becomes a mirror. And you, the empath, begin to lose yourself in the reflection of your own longing, believing you are loving another, when in truth, you are trying to heal the wounded part within yourself. Jung said, "Nothing binds two people more strongly than the meeting of their wounds." And so, an invisible contract is signed not with words, but with energy, with a gaze, with an unexplainable vibration. You believe you came to love, but in truth, you came to see. To see what neither of you has ever dared to face. This is not a story about love. It is a story about awareness, about how light and darkness meet, clash, and awaken each other. And soon you will understand every deep attraction is a ritual of the soul. When light and darkness have touched, an invisible covenant is formed, no words, no conscious agreement, only energy. Jung called this participation mystique, the merging of unconsciousness, where two souls no longer know where I ends and you begin, where the real and the reflected blur into one. The empath and the narcissist enter each other like two mirrors facing one another. Each believes they are seeing the other, when in truth they are only seeing what is missing within themselves. The empath, with an open heart and an instinct to heal, believes they were sent to help someone return to their better nature. The narcissist, with a deep wound covered by a coat of pride, believes they have found an energy source that can fill the void inside. And so, a contract is signed in pain. The empath promises unconditional love. The narcissist promises to change. But neither realizes they have just signed the sentence of their own soul. This relationship is not built on equality, but on energetic exchange. One gives until empty, the other receives until saturated. The empath feels meaningful when acting as savior. The narcissist feels existent when reflected as special. Both are performing the same play, only in different roles. One the rescuer, the other the rescued, yet beneath it all. Both are running from their own darkness. The empath does not see that the belief "I can heal you" comes from an ancient wound, the wound of a child taught that love must be earned through sacrifice. The narcissist does not see that the craving "admire me" is the echo of a child once starved for validation. They do not meet in the present, they meet in the echo of unhealed pasts. And thus the loop begins. Each time the empath gives, the narcissist feels stronger. Each time the narcissist withdraws energy, the empath loves harder, believing that true love can save anything. But the unconscious cares nothing for romance. It only seeks recognition. And in this game, it follows a ruthless but precise law. What is denied returns in the form of another person. The empath becomes the mother, the savior, the healer. The narcissist becomes the eternal child who must be loved. But inside, the roles invert. The empath, the more they try to save, the more they lose themselves, confusing love with duty, kindness with endurance. Meanwhile, the narcissist, fed by that energy, grows emptier still, for they do not know how to absorb light, only how to reflect it. Jung once wrote, "Nothing binds two people more strongly than the meeting of their wounds. That is the unconscious contract where one soul mirrors the pain of another so both may finally see. But in reality, only one awakens first, and it is always the empath. For the empath is inwardly attuned. They sense dissonance in tone, energy, gaze. They begin to feel something here isn't real. Yet they stay believing that sincere love can change everything. Here begins the empath's tragedy, and also the seed of awakening. Because love is not an exchange of energy. It is the meeting of two souls who have both made peace with their own shadow. But the empath doesn't know that yet. They are still playing the savior, still patching someone else's brokenness, unaware that their own cracks are widening each day. Every tragedy begins as a beautiful dream. For the empath, the early stage of a relationship with a narcissist feels like entering a realm of magic where every wound is soothed, every emptiness filled, and the heart that once lay dormant beats again with the belief, "At last, I am understood." The narcissist appears as the twin soul, refined, romantic, profound, convincing the empath that out of millions, only this person truly sees them. But the truth is, the narcissist does not see you. They see their own reflection in you. Carl Jung said, "Every act of illumination begins with blindness." When the narcissist projects their ideal image onto you, they also blind you to the truth. They awaken in you the image of the partner you always dreamed of, one who would love you fully, protect you, heal the world with you. And you, the empath, with a heart full of faith, respond with all that you are. You give them trust, loyalty, gentleness, your very life force. But behind those passionate eyes and tender promises lies a kind of psychological magic, the hypnosis of projection of perfection. The narcissist doesn't love you. They love the power of making you believe you found your destined soul. They use the language of love to build a stage where you play the hero, and they play the one in need of redemption. Love becomes a hypnotic ritual. The empath lives inside the artificial glow of compliments, embraces, and seemingly sacred moments. They feel chosen, seen, destined. But the unconscious always knows the brightest light often comes from a flame about to die. At this point, the empath can no longer distinguish where they end and the other begins. They dissolve, melt, disappear into the role of lover, rescuer, understander. They think this merging proves true love. But in truth, it is the sign of emotional hypnosis, where the self loses its center and becomes part of an unconscious script. The narcissist, guided by the sharp intuition of a survivor, knows exactly what you long to hear. They say the words you once dreamed someone would say. They touch your old wounds not to heal them, but to make you depend on them. You feel safe, but you are imprisoned inside a golden cage. They make you believe that no one could ever understand you like they do, that only they share a soul connection with you. But the soul never needs promises. Only the ego demands worship. In the intoxicating sweetness of love bombing, the empath doesn't realize that every compliment is a string, every touch a tether. They slowly lose the ability to tell real connection from subtle manipulation. They don't know that behind those loving eyes is a mirror reflecting their own energy back at them, only to siphon it away piece by piece. And then, once the narcissist has finished sculpting the statue of perfect love, they begin to quietly withdraw the warmth that once enchanted you. No more tender messages, no more knowing glances. Only long silences, strange disappearances, subtle changes you can't explain. You start to blame yourself. Maybe I did something wrong. And in that moment, the spell is complete because the empath has shifted from love to guilt. And guilt is the strongest chain in every toxic bond. Jung once wrote, "What we love in others is often the part of ourselves we have not yet lived." In the narcissist, the empath loves the image of strength, confidence, and self-possession, the parts they once rejected for fear of being seen as selfish. In the empath, the narcissist loves the image of kindness and purity, the parts they lost in childhood. Two souls find each other not to be happy, but to mirror back what each has lost. The spell begins to crack when the empath realizes, the person I love may never have existed, but instead of leaving, they stay because they cannot accept that it was all an illusion. This is the deepest hypnosis. When you no longer love because of who the other person is, but because you fear losing what they made you feel about yourself. Meanwhile, the narcissist starts to grow bored. Once they have siphoned enough energy, the fantasy of the perfect soulmate fades. They begin testing distance, testing limits, testing your tolerance. They want to know, will you love me even if I hurt you? Because in their psychology, love equals power, and to feel loved, they must feel they can make you hurt. From here, the mirror begins to fracture. Admiration turns into unease. Gentle light becomes a consuming flame. But the empath doesn't see it yet. They still believe that if they just love more, everything will return to how it was. They don't yet know that when the narcissist stops projecting light, they begin revealing shadow. And so, the magic thins. No more halo. No more destined soulmates, only two people standing before a mirror, one slowly disappearing, the other exposing the emptiness within. This is the phase shift, when love becomes a maze, when the empath begins losing themselves to sustain an illusion, but the unconscious remains loyal to its purpose. It does not send you love to make you happy. It sends you darkness to awaken you. Only when the spell shatters does the soul begin to open its eyes. After the enchantment phase, the narcissist enters a cycle of coldness. They turn distant, indifferent, sometimes cruel in a detached way. Whenever you try to talk about feelings, they evade, deny, even flip the script. This is when gaslighting begins, the most subtle form of manipulation. Whenever you doubt something, they make you believe you're imagining things, too sensitive, too dramatic. And because you are an empath inclined to doubt yourself more than others, you start believing it's your fault. Jung said, when we realize we are being mirrored, we begin to see the other. This is that stage when the mirror starts to crack. You no longer see the person you loved as before. You begin to notice the fissures, the shadows, the contradictions that the light of illusion once concealed. The more you try to fix, the more distorted the relationship becomes. You start losing your inner peace, losing the sense of safety in the emotional home you built. The empath lives in two parallel realities. On one side, the memory of the intoxicating early love. On the other, a cold, confusing present. They cling to memory like a drowning person clings to a float, hoping the old them will return, that this is only a phase. But in truth, that person never existed, only the reflected version, the narcissist constructed with words and gestures to manipulate your feelings. As the light fades, their darkness shows through. They begin to belittle you, to mock what they once praised. What they called special becomes too sensitive. What was once cherished becomes a target of attack. This reversal scrambles your mind and shakes your heart. You begin to doubt everything, even your own worth. And that is their unconscious aim, to push you into a decentered state where you're easiest to control. The narcissist needs control not because they are strong, but because they are afraid. They fear that if you see who they really are, you will leave and they will lose their reflection. That fear drives them to warp reality, turning love into a power game. The empath, driven by a peacekeeping instinct, keeps yielding. They apologize even when they're not wrong, keep explaining, keep loving harder. But the harder they try, the wider the gap grows. True love cannot be sustained by endurance. True love needs the light of two conscious souls. It cannot grow in the darkness of denial. Gradually, the empath feels like a vessel being drained. They wake each morning with a hollow ache they cannot name. They laugh less, speak less, and inside them a small, steady voice begins to rise. This is not love. That is the first sound of intuition, the deep wisdom the narcissist cannot manipulate. Their shadow becomes clearer, and your light begins to waver. You realize the promises that once moved, you are now distant echoes. You can no longer find warmth in their eyes, only a cold emptiness like still water at night. And when you begin to ask, who am I loving? Or am I only loving the feeling of being reflected? That is the moment your soul begins to awaken. Collapse never happens all at once. It fractures from within bit by bit with every denial you endure, every silent tear, every time you erase yourself to hold together a relationship that is already dissolving. This is no longer love. It is emotional addiction, an addiction forged by cycles of affection and injury. When Jung said, every collapse begins with awareness, he meant that only when we start to see does the illusion begin to dissolve. And you are at that threshold, the moment when the light of awareness starts seeping through the cracks. You begin to see the truth. They don't need you. They need the energy you carry. You are not loved for who you are, but for the role you play in their imaginary world. And then, in silence, you begin to withdraw. Not with words, but with energy. You stop explaining, stop arguing, stop proving. You simply observe, and that is when the narcissist begins to panic. Because when the empath stops reacting, the spell breaks. When the light withdraws, the shadow has nowhere to hide. Now the mirror is shattered. And in the last shard, you see a truth you once feared to face. You were never truly seen, only used as a mirror for someone else to see themselves. But from that very moment, you begin to see yourself at last, not through a mirror, not through another, but with the awakened eyes of your own soul. This is the beginning of freedom. Not the kind that comes from leaving someone, but the kind that comes from no longer being bound by illusion. From here, you enter the quiet withdrawal, not to take revenge, but to return home. For the soul can only be reborn by passing through the breaking, and that is precisely what lies ahead. At first, the narcissist will panic. They don't understand what is happening. In their mind, you cannot leave. You were the one addicted to them, the one who always came back after each rupture. Your silence strips them of control. They will try everything to restore the old balance. Tearful apologies, midnight messages, promises to change, then anger, threats, smearing. They swing from sweet to cruel, from pleading to degrading, just to provoke a reaction from you. Because as long as you react, they feel they still exist in your mind. When all of it fails, a terrifying quiet begins. Jung said, an inflated ego will always collapse under the weight of its own illusion. That is what is happening. The narcissist starts to unravel, not because you left, but because their illusion of power is no longer being sustained. They do not know how to love, but they do know how to be addicted. Addicted to admiration, to control, to being the center. When the supply vanishes, that addiction hurls them into crisis. They begin to blame others, circumstances, you, fate. They spin tragic tales, play the victim to harvest pity. But deep in the unconscious, they know one thing. The truth is closing in. The mask is cracking, and the darkness beneath is spilling out. This is the stage psychologists call narcissistic collapse, the downfall of a personality constructed from illusion. The narcissist has no true inner foundation. They are a hollow structure built from others' reflections. When those reflections disappear, the structure falls. They feel as if they're dying not a bodily death, but the death of the ego. Your silence forces them to face what they have avoided their whole life: inner emptiness. They may seek new supply, another person to replace you, to restore the feeling of being admired. But the strange thing is, with each new supply, the crack inside them deepens, because nothing can fill what one refuses to face. They may laugh, post happy photos, flaunt a new love, but behind those smiles is a trembling soul. They know the new person does not see them, only the illusion they have constructed. And so the cycle repeats, each time weaker, faster, emptier. And you, the empath, now stand on the outside, seeing everything as one who has awakened from a long dream. You no longer hate them. You simply see clearly they are not truly living. They exist only in the reflections of others. The destruction they undergo is not caused by you, but by the absence of the light of truth. When the light withdraws, darkness has nothing left to cling to, and it collapses into the very void it created. Many narcissists at this stage fall into extremes: depression, addiction, aimlessness, or self-destructive behaviors. Others try to rebuild an image, changing careers, religions, or proclaiming themselves awakened. But everything they touch is still just another mask. True awakening happens only when a person dares to look at the darkness within, not run from it. This collapse, in Jung's terms, is mortificatio, the necessary decomposition of the inflated ego. It is the first part of spiritual transformation, yet few pass through it. Narcissists, fearing pain, usually choose flight, denial, or another person to continue the cycle. Only a few, the souls who truly hit bottom, can look into the shattered mirror and begin to ask, "Who am I?" without being reflected. All of it, love, rage, apologies, attacks, tears, serves one aim: to pull you back into the hall of mirrors, because in your silence you have done what they never could: face yourself. In their unconscious, they sense this, and it terrifies them. If you can leave without needing them, if you can exist without reacting, then their entire illusion of power has collapsed. They are no longer the center. They are no longer worshipped. And there is no energy left to sustain the self-image. But whatever path they choose, the loop cannot continue as before. The empath's silence has severed the chain of reflections and exposed the vacuum of the illusion. From here, the narcissist soul faces two choices: die within the darkness of the ego, or be born again in the light of awareness. Now the narcissist enters a state of absolute emptiness. Many describe this as an inner death. They feel as though they are falling into a black hole, unseen, meaningless, unheard. Everything that once made them feel powerful, work, status, romance, social media, loses its life. They begin to seek new supply like an addict chasing a fix. But nothing is strong enough to make them feel real anymore. In Jungian analysis, this is the nigredo point for the uninitiated, the blackness that should lead to rebirth, but in them is blocked by the lack of awareness. They do not know. This is their one chance to become authentic. They resist it, deny it, blame others. That very denial allows the darkness to swallow them whole. Some narcissists turn to religion, spirituality, or energy healing, not to truly heal, but to gild the ego. They turn even darkness into a brand, pain into a tool to attract attention. Yet inside, they remain a frightened child searching for someone else to reflect them. And you, the empath, have stepped out of that labyrinth. From the outside, you see and understand you were not their light. You were merely a mirror of truth. When you withdrew that light, they did not collapse because they lost you, but because they lost the illusion of who they thought they were. The narcissist's collapse is the universe's lesson in deep justice. No one can escape their own darkness forever. Everything they did to avoid facing it. Manipulation, deceit, control, projection returns like a black wave, and this time no one stands between them and the impact. For the empath, this is when true compassion is born. Not the blind compassion of the rescuer, but the compassion of one who understands. Every soul must take responsibility for its own shadow. You cannot save them, because they are not yet willing to be saved. The best you can do is live as evidence that real light can exist without needing anyone to reflect it. Yet when the empath leaves, they often think they are free. Few know that after stepping out of the storm, peace does not arrive immediately. They pass into a deeper night. No narcissist, no drama, no psychological games to distract them, only themselves, bare, exhausted, and empty. This is Nigredo, the pitch-black phase in the alchemical work of the soul. Jung called it the dark night of the soul, the night in which the ego dissolves so the true soul can be born. At first, the empath feels stripped of everything. The world that once buzzed with life becomes frighteningly quiet. Old habits, old beliefs, even the old idea of self lose meaning. They do not want to love, to trust, or to save anyone. The mind is like an empty room where echoes of the past still resound, but no one answers back. In that darkness, they can no longer see who they are, and that is the first step of rebirth. The empath once believed they were born to heal. Now they face a painful truth. That very belief was the chain that kept them in the loop of suffering. In seeking to heal others, they forgot they too needed healing. In the new light of awareness, they see clearly. Saving others had been a way to flee their own loneliness. With no one left to rescue, they must turn toward what was abandoned within the shadow they always feared. This night is not punishment. It is the alchemical furnace where the gold of the soul is extracted from the ashes of illusion. In that darkness, the empath begins to feel every emotion once suppressed: anger at betrayal, fear of abandonment, shame for overgiving, and even resentment toward themselves for not protecting their own heart. These feelings rise like fire, burning away the mask of the always strong one, revealing the true child within fragile, trembling but real. Jung wrote, "Only when we can endure our own darkness can we stand steadfast in the light." That is what is happening now. The empath's soul is being purified through flame. Every long, lonely night, every inexplicable cry, every moment of despair, each is part of the rebirth. Before metal becomes gold, it must pass through fire. In this phase, the empath will feel the urge to withdraw from the world. Outer noise turns meaningless. They seek silence, nature, empty spaces, not to escape, but to hear the voice of their own soul again. There, in stillness, they discover something they had never truly known. Peace does not come from anyone else. It has always been within only, hidden beneath the need to be seen, to be loved, to be accepted. When the light of the outer world fades, the inner light begins to flicker. At first, it is faint, like a candle flame trembling in a storm. But with every deep breath the empath takes, with every moment they choose to face pain instead of pushing it away, the flame grows stronger. Layers of ego fall away. Old memories are released, and gradually silence ceases to be frightening. It becomes the teacher. The dark night of the soul is where the empath discovers a profound truth. I cannot save anyone because no one truly needs saving. Every soul must walk through its own darkness. The words sound cold at first, but they are the seed of freedom. When the empath stops trying to save, they begin to live. Nigredo is the phase where everything within seems to dissolve, but it is precisely in that dissolution that the old structure breaks open to let the new light in. It is the necessary death of the old self, the one who lived through roles, kindness, and boundless empathy. And as that self disintegrates, another begins to form, aware, calm, grounded, no longer reactive, no longer needing validation, no longer afraid of solitude. One quiet night, among the shards of memory, the empath senses something they've never felt so clearly. True love is never loud. It doesn't arrive through promises, scripts, or mirrors. It is a still, warm presence, like the breath of the universe resting in one's chest. And in that moment, they understand that none of the pain was meaningless. It was the doorway to wholeness. When the first dawn breaks after the dark night, the empath is no longer who they were. The light within them is not dazzling but steady. It is not the light of someone trying to save the world. It is the light of someone who has made peace with themselves. From within the Nigredo, their soul has crossed an invisible threshold, the gate of awareness, where light and shadow no longer oppose each other but coexist in harmony. And from here, a new journey begins. The integration of the shadow, where clarity comes not from avoiding darkness, but from embracing it. After the dark night, the light doesn't rush back. It returns slowly, cautiously, as if wanting to be sure that the one who emerged from the darkness is ready to truly see themselves. For the empath, this is no longer a journey of emotion, but of awareness. Because after Nigredo, where the ego melts, the soul enters a deeper stage, reconciliation with the shadow. All their life, the empath was taught that to be good meant to be gentle, understanding, forgiving. They grew up believing that to love is to sacrifice, that their light would save the world. But Jung once said, "No one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And now, the empath's light begins to shine on the very place they once feared most, their own shadow. They begin to see the truth behind their goodness. Behind the desire to heal others lies a fear of being useless. Behind infinite tolerance lies a fear of abandonment. Behind selflessness lies an ancient wound. If I am not good enough, I will not be loved. This darkness is not evil. It is simply the part that was never brought into the light. This is the hardest stage, for the empath must face that within them too lives possessiveness, suppressed anger, jealousy, and the ego's hunger to be worshipped traits they once saw only in the narcissist. They realize it was their denial of these parts that made them the opposite extreme, the savior. And it was that polarity that drew them into karmic orbit with the narcissist, like two magnets, light and shadow, longing to reunite. When the empath begins to accept, I too have a shadow, something miraculous happens. The fear of losing others starts to fade, because they see, I never truly lost anyone. I only feared losing the part of myself I had projected onto them. The anger they once felt ashamed of becomes a boundary, a protective energy instead of a destructive one. And compassion transforms. It is no longer sacrifice, but wisdom with limits. Darkness is no longer the enemy. It becomes the teacher, the one who shows them how to say no without guilt, how to love without dissolving, how to be present without carrying another's pain. When they dare to face what once made them ashamed, they can no longer be easily manipulated, because now no one can use their own shadow against them. This is the integration of the soul, where the empath no longer divides life into good and bad, light and dark. They understand that both are the heartbeat of the same existence. Light without darkness is illusion. Darkness without light is lostness. When the two meet, energy becomes whole. One morning the empath may wake and realize they no longer tremble at the mention of the past. They no longer need to prove they've moved on. No need to post wise quotes or appear strong. They simply are. Quiet, simple, steady. It isn't joy they feel, but a deep stillness. The state of a soul at peace with itself. From this point, they begin to experience a new kind of empathy, not the draining kind, but conscious empathy. They can feel another's pain without merging with it. They know when to listen and when to step back. They love, but no longer need anyone to define their love. For the old empath, love meant giving everything away. For the new empath, love is presence without losing center. They no longer wish to save anyone, because they understand to save someone who is not ready is to steal their lesson. Instead, they choose to illuminate through how they live, peaceful, sovereign, honest with both their light and their shadow. Jung called this stage individuation, the process by which the soul becomes whole. No more division, no more dependence, no more reflections. The empath at this point no longer merely heals, they become healing itself. They no longer need to shine to be loved, they are the light. And strangely, once they integrate the shadow, those who once hurt them suddenly have no power left. Not because those people have vanished, but because they can no longer draw any reflection from you. You are no longer their mirror. They can talk, invent, perform, but you simply smile, no judgment, no hatred. You understand. Their actions are only the echo of an unseen shadow within them, and your light is no longer tasked with healing it. This is the moment of true freedom, not freedom from other people, but freedom from roles, the good one, the rescuer, the endurer. You no longer need to play any part. You simply are honest, strong, full of humanity, yet unmoved by karma. And within that wholeness, a new energy is born, spiritual sovereignty. You are no longer light set against darkness, you are the whole, where both dance together. You understand you are not the victim of a story, but a soul chosen to experience it, to learn, to rise, to know that true light does not fear darkness. It embraces it and makes it part of itself. From here, the empath has completed the latter half of the alchemical journey. Spiritual gold has begun to form gold that cannot be stolen, manipulated, or mirrored. It is the energy of a soul that knows exactly who it is, and therefore needs no one else to define it. And in the stillness of that awareness, you hear a whisper, soft but deep. I no longer fear the darkness, for I have become a light that knows how to illumine itself. When the darkness and the light within you are reconciled, something new begins to arise, not loud or dramatic, but deep, quiet, and steady like an underground spring. This is the birth of the sovereign soul, or what Jung called the emergence of the self, the true center of the psyche where all fragments are gathered into a whole. Once you lived like a shard of glass, reflecting others' feelings, adjusting yourself to soothe them, to keep the peace. Now you no longer reflect, you shine from within. That light is not pride, but pure presence light that needs no proof, no declaration, no witness to know it exists. The former empath loved in order to be needed. The sovereign empath loves because love is their natural state. They no longer love to fill a void, but because they are full. They give not from fear of loss, but from the understanding that energy given in the right place returns multiplied. They no longer seek a twin soul, because they have become a whole soul. In this phase, you feel everything around you slow down. Those who once unmoored you become distant echoes. What once made you anxious no longer reaches you. You realize that what you once called profound love was often dependence romanticized. True love does not need tragedy to prove its depth. True love is the state of peace in presence. You begin to practice a new kind of empathy, not the kind that drains you, but empathy joined with wisdom and boundaries. You sense another's pain without absorbing it. You know when to extend your arms and when to be still. You know that refusal is sometimes the highest form of love, because it gives the other person the chance to face themselves. In this new light, you look back on the journey and instead of resentment, you feel gratitude. Grateful that darkness taught you how to see, that collapse forced you to rebuild, that silence taught you to hear your own heart. You understand the narcissist was not a spiritual enemy, but a courier of the unconscious, a messenger sent to deliver the lesson your soul chose long ago, the lesson of sovereignty. Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." And you have awakened. You no longer live in the collective dream of who's right, who's wrong, who hurt whom. You understand that encounter was never a mistake. It was a right, a matrix designed for you to remember who you are. From here, the empath is no longer the good person. In the old sense, they become the real person. One who knows that both light and darkness within are sacred. One who does not strive to prove, does not chase gain or loss, simply is, and therefore influences everything around them. The power of the sovereign empath no longer lies in healing others, but in a centered energy as steady as gravity. They need not say much. Their presence itself is an invitation. Return to your own center. Then, when the narcissist who once knew them looks again, they no longer see prey, but the mirror they themselves lost. As for the empath, they have no need for revenge or vindication. They no longer play the ego's game. They understand that the silence of the awakened is the loudest sound in the universe. In this sovereign state, the empath walks differently, more slowly, but with purpose. They are no longer swept up by others' emotions. Rather, emotions begin to move in rhythm with them. They are no longer pulled into anyone's story. They become the author of their own. This is true rebirth, not a return to what was, but the becoming of a deeper, quieter, more complete version of oneself. You are no longer a light searching for a surface to shine on. You are the torch that bears its own flame. From here, the journey is no longer about fleeing or seeking. It is conscious presence in the world. You live, love, work, and create without losing your center. You know how to pass through chaos without letting your heart be shaken. And that is the sign of a soul that has reached sovereignty, the freedom of one who has walked through hell and returned carrying light. Now you understand that real power is not control, but wholeness. No one can strip your worth, because you no longer price yourself by another's gaze. You have become the gatekeeper of your soul, knowing who may enter and who must remain outside. And in that calm, you realize silence is no longer defense, it is the language of wisdom. Peace is no longer a reward, it is your natural state. And love is no longer an effort, but the condition of being. You have returned not as someone merely wounded, but as a soul transmuted into gold by fire. From the one who sought reflections, you have become the source of light. And that is the true moment of rebirth. As the empath's light stabilizes, the mirror turns. The universe, by a silent, perfectly precise order, always returns energy to the place from which it arose. This time it is the narcissist who must face the mirror they once controlled. But now it no longer reflects at their command, it reflects the truth. There is no longer you to absorb their rage, no one to manipulate, no audience for their performance. In that silence, what they once projected into the world, deceit, arrogance, pretense, returns like shards of glass reflecting straight into their eyes. Jung said, no one can see the light without first confronting their own hell. And now, they are in a hell of their own making. When you left, they thought you would return. When you went silent, they thought you were testing them. But as time passes and all reflections vanish, they begin to feel the chill of psychological vacuum. That is when the perfect versions they crafted start to fall apart. No one believes, no one listens, no one is willing to give energy. They stand in the desert of their own ego, where every illusion melts in true light. At first, they try to fill the void. New partners, new jobs, new beliefs, even a new spiritual path. But what they truly seek is not love, it is reflection. They need someone to confirm they are still special. This time, however, the universe does not send them someone like you. The people they meet reflect only what they tried to hide: deceit, manipulation, fear. And so the lesson begins, the lesson of psychological karma. Karma, in Jung's language, is not punishment, but the unconscious confronting itself. Everything we deny returns in the form of other people until we finally see it. The narcissist fled from themselves by turning others into mirrors. But when the true mirror you withdraws, they have nowhere left to run. They are forced to look into the emptiness within. And in that emptiness, they begin to see themselves, a child abandoned, afraid, unloved one who learned to survive by becoming someone admirable. They realize that every manipulation, every outburst, every cruelty was nothing more than a desperate attempt to avoid feeling that pain again. Not every narcissist reaches this point. Most will choose to keep running, to keep building new illusions. But a few, the ones whose souls have truly hit rock bottom, begin to awaken. In utter loneliness, they realize, no one betrayed me. I betrayed myself. When that sentence echoes through consciousness, it marks the beginning of the true death of the ego. This death is not tragic, it is necessary. Jung called it enantiodromia, the phenomenon by which every extreme turns into its opposite. From arrogance is born humility. From darkness, light. If they are brave enough to endure the disintegration, their soul has a chance to be reborn, not as a narcissist, but as an authentic human being. And you, who were once their mirror, no longer need to witness this. That journey is no longer yours. Your light has been gathered back to the center, not to reflect, but to illuminate your own path. Yet on a deep level of the soul, you can still sense the law of cosmic balance. No energy is ever lost, it only transforms. One day, you may hear that they have changed. Perhaps they speak of healing, awakening, or transformation. You need not judge whether it is real or not, for it no longer matters. The darkness they face is theirs. The light you hold is yours. Two souls now walk different roads, yet both move toward the same destination, the true center of themselves. When you look back, there is no resentment, only a serene smile. You understand that everything that happened, enchantment, manipulation, collapse, silence, was part of a cosmic ritual, a rite of liberation, freeing two souls from dependency. You were taught how to love without losing yourself. They were forced to confront themselves. The mirror has turned. You no longer reflect them, and they no longer define you. That mirror now reveals the authentic being where light and shadow coexist in harmony. And there, in the stillness of awareness, you finally understand what Jung once wrote. The tree that would reach to heaven must have its roots in hell. You have touched hell and returned. They are still inside it. But both of you serve the same movement of the soul, awakening. There is no winner, no loser, only light meeting itself through darkness. And that is the moment the wheel of karma completes its circle. After the mirror has turned and all illusions have dissolved, the empath enters the final stage of the alchemical journey, the stage Jung called albedo and rubedo, where the soul is purified and transmuted into gold. This is when the empath ceases to be merely healed and becomes the alchemist of the soul, one who knows how to turn every wound, every shadow, every loss into wisdom and light. Once, the empath thought strength meant kindness, the ability to give or unconditional forgiveness. Now they understand that true strength lies in transformation. Forgiveness is no longer an act of moral superiority, but the natural dissolution of resistance when one sees the truth of things. For when you realize that no one truly harmed you, that every soul is merely playing its role in the theater of evolution, resentment melts away, and from its ashes rises wisdom. Now the empath looks back on the journey not as a chain of mistakes, but as a process of distillation. Each wound was a flame, each tear a drop of purification. Together they formed gold, the gold of consciousness, which no one can steal, for it was forged in the furnace of the soul, not in the world outside. The alchemist of the soul does not flee the dark. They use it as raw material. They understand that anger, fear, and desire, all the emotions they once felt ashamed of, contain the seeds of power. Just as crude metal needs fire to become gold, the soul needs suffering to become wisdom. Nothing in life is meaningless, for everything becomes a catalyst for awakening. With eyes washed clean by awareness, the empath perceives the law governing every soul. None can avoid darkness. Only those who pass through it find real light. They see, too, that they themselves have been the darkness in someone else's story, that every soul is at once teacher and student, wounder and healer. From that realization, their compassion changes. It is no longer pity, but sacred respect for each being's path. They no longer interfere to save, nor try to make others see what they are not ready to see. They simply exist, like a quiet lamp, shining without intrusion, guiding without pulling. Jung once said, "What we deny becomes our fate. What we accept becomes our power." Now the empath understands this profoundly. They no longer wish to escape fate, for they have become its author not through effort, but through conscious presence. They no longer need to prove or be recognized, for life itself within them has become the proof that light can be born from darkness. They live simply, yet their energy makes others feel safe, peaceful, and seen, not because they try to heal, but because they have become healing. Their voice, their eyes, their walk, all carry the vibration of one who has made peace with both heaven and hell within themselves. The empath no longer fears solitude, for solitude has become a temple. In the silence they create, they write, they meditate, they observe life flow by without needing to control it. They understand that life does not need to be saved. It only needs to be seen with gratitude. This is the summit of the alchemical journey where the soul completes its cycle. From unconsciousness, reflection, dissolution, integration, illumination, the empath is no longer the one who was wounded. They are the one who discovers the meaning within the wound. They no longer say, I must move beyond my past, but rather, I have become that past, and it has become light. Their very presence is living proof of the universe's eternal law. Nothing is lost, only untransformed. Pain becomes knowledge, anger becomes compassion, loss becomes wisdom, and within them light and darkness no longer fight, they fuse into the gold of the soul. The true alchemist does not hold a holy chalice in their hands, but a heart that has been melted and reborn. And that is the treasure no power in the world can ever take away. The empath no longer seeks miracles. They become the miracle. They live as proof that no darkness can imprison light forever. There is only light not yet brave enough to return and embrace its own darkness. And so, the ring of fire completes. After passing through the dark, the soul returns to the light, no longer naive, but fully aware. No longer weak, but supple and strong like water. No longer seeking love, because they themselves are love. There was a time the empath believed the path of healing ends when pain disappears. But the true alchemist knows the process only truly begins when we stop fearing pain and step into it as into a sacred flame. For in the fire, everything false burns away and only what is true remains. After Nigredo, after the darkness, after the breaking, the empath does not revert to who they were. They become something entirely different, carrying the light of awareness and the heat of experience. They no longer try to escape emotions, they learn to smelt them. They no longer let anger consume them. They look straight at it as an alchemist regards graphite, knowing that with patience it will become diamond. Once, they believed healing meant soothing wounds. Now they understand that healing is the capacity to bear the whole truth without closing the heart. When we dare to see things exactly as they are, no sugarcoating, no excuses, no blame, we begin to release the energy once trapped in fear. In each of those moments, the empath not only lives, they transmute. They realize that true forgiveness is not overlooking someone's actions, but withdrawing energy from the wound. When we no longer need them to apologize, and no longer need ourselves to forget, the energy stuck in the past frees itself. Forgiveness becomes a state, not a decision. It is given to no one. It happens on its own when we understand the mechanism of suffering, that no one really harms anyone, only souls collide to reflect what has not yet been seen. In this state, the empath begins to grasp the laws of energy more deeply. They see that every event, however harsh, hides the soul's intention to evolve. The one who once hurt them is not merely a villain, but a catalyst, forcing them to leave the role of victim and become a creator. When they recognize this, resentment vanishes not because it is soothed, but because it is no longer needed. The alchemist of the soul views the world with new eyes. Everything has two faces, and each serves the soul's maturation. Pain is no longer the enemy, but the sacred fire. It burns not to destroy, but to purify. Solitude is no longer punishment, but the chamber of rebirth. Loss is no longer an end, but the space where the new can enter. At this stage, They no longer speak in terms of them and me, victim and perpetrator. They see interwoven streams of energy where each soul simply plays its part in the drama of collective awakening. In that awareness, division dissolves. They understand that the narcissist too may once have been an empath in another life, someone who gave so much that one day the soul chose the opposite path, to build the ego's wall in order to learn boundaries. Meanwhile, the present empath chose the path of dissolution to learn sovereignty. Opposite directions, one destination, wholeness. This realization heals not only the personal but the collective, for they no longer war against darkness, but recognize that every soul is finding its way to light, only at different phases. From that understanding, they begin to treat life as a soul laboratory. Every interaction, emotion, and conflict becomes material for the work. When someone hurts them, they do not react at once. They observe, what part of me was just touched? Which wound is asking to be seen? They learn to turn every pain into a lesson, every mistake into creative material. The alchemist no longer seeks a happy ending, because they know every ending is a form of beginning. Each time a chapter closes, energy rearranges to open new possibilities. Life becomes a wheel of dissolution and rebirth, and they who have tasted both fire and ash can smile at any cycle, knowing nothing is lost, only changing form. Now, the empath teaches not with words, but with presence. When they enter a room, the air softens. When they speak, people feel heard. When they are silent, others still feel safe. Because the energy they carry no longer swings between love and fear, it has become the stillness of awareness. They know how to create gold in each small interaction, with gratitude instead of reaction, with an honest gaze instead of judgment, with patience instead of control. They no longer preach healing, they live it. They no longer tell stories about darkness, they have dissolved it into the rhythm of their own heart. For the empath, the supreme alchemy is to make oneself the grail, not a cup that holds holy water, but a vessel that contains every experience, light and dark, and knows that all of it is sacred. They no longer need to eliminate anything, because everything has become part of the whole. The alchemist no longer asks, why is this happening to me, but what is this trying to teach me? No longer says, I can't bear this, but what part of me is being asked to expand? No longer says, I must protect myself from the dark, but I will bring light into this darkness. That is when the transformation completes. The empath does not merely understand darkness, they know how to use it as the raw material of creation. And in that union, they reach the summit of the soul's journey. Freedom. Freedom from roles, from storylines, from the need to be understood, to be loved, to be validated. Freedom to be like a flame that needs no one to kindle it, like a river that needs no praise to flow. When the empath reaches this point, they are no longer in the healing game. They are practicing the art of conscious living. And with each breath, each glance, each simple choice, they do the greatest work the human soul can do, transmute darkness into light. Not through words, but through their very existence. Not by force of will, but by a peace that emanates naturally like the fragrance of true gold. This is the true alchemist, the one who passed through fire and became the fire itself. When the refining fire has burned out, only ash and gold remain. The empath, no longer a seeker, becomes a bearer emerging from the cave of the soul and returning to the world with new eyes. But the world is no longer the same, for they have changed their seeing, and when the eye changes, reality changes with it. Once they saw the world through good and evil, wounding and healing. Now they see only movement. Everything is returning to its center. Everyone, lost or awakened, is heading in the same direction, the direction of awareness. No more right or wrong, no more good or bad, only meaning. When the empath returns, they bring no doctrine, only presence. In a noisy world, they are the pause. In a society hungry to prove itself, they are the one who no longer needs to become anything. They simply are. Their presence itself heals not because they do anything, but because they no longer wish to be anyone else. Now they no longer search for an outer mission, for they understand Conscious presence is the mission. They work, love, create, and connect, but not to fill a void, not to prove, not to control. Every act arises from wholeness, not from need. They can sit drinking tea in silence and still feel they are serving life. For when the soul is aligned with the center, every breath is meditation, every moment a rite. To the unawakened world, the sovereign empath may seem strange, quiet, reserved, seemingly indifferent. But within that stillness flows a pure current. They no longer react to darkness, because they know only darkness needs to react. True light has nothing to prove, it only needs to be. Sometimes they stand in a crowd and see plainly people still searching for each other in fear, still using one another as mirrors, still mistaking control for love, noise for existence. But instead of judging, they smile, for they were once the same. They understand that everyone is passing through different chapters of the same journey they have completed. The soul alchemist returns not to preach, but to live as a witness of light. They know light cannot be forced upon anyone. It can only be remembered. So they do not try to awaken others, they simply keep their flame burning, and for any heart that carries tinder within, that flame will catch on its own. Ya no desean que el mundo los entienda, porque entender es asunto de la mente, y ellos ahora viven desde el alma. Ya no necesitan ser escuchados, porque han aprendido a escucharse a sí mismos. Ya no necesitan ser amados, porque el amor ya no es una emoción, es un estado de presencia. En los momentos más simples, una mañana preparando té, una caminata al atardecer, una página leída en la noche, sienten fluir la corriente sagrada de la energía a través de todas las cosas. No necesitan milagros ni profecías. El milagro es la simpleza de existir. El mundo sigue igual. Aún hay engaño, violencia, ruina y pérdida. Pero ellos ya no tiemblan ante la oscuridad. Saben que la oscuridad es solo una parte del gran ciclo. La noche es necesaria para que nazca el amanecer. Miran las ruinas de la humanidad y no desesperan. Ven en ellas el proceso del nigredo colectivo, donde la conciencia humana se descompone para renacer. El empath soberano se convierte en guardián de la luz en tiempos de caos. Es quien mantiene la fe cuando todos la pierden. Quien sigue amando cuando el mundo elige odiar. Quien permanece quieto mientras la multitud huye. No porque sea especial, sino porque comprende. La verdadera luz solo tiene sentido si se mantiene encendida en la noche más oscura. Ahora, cada vez que se encuentra con personas del pasado, aquellas almas que alguna vez le causaron dolor, ya no ve enemigos, sino maestros disfrazados de antagonistas. Agradece en silencio, porque sin ellos el viaje alquímico nunca habría comenzado. Sin reflejo, no hay espejo. Sin oscuridad, no hay luz. Sin ruptura, no hay libertad. Jung escribió una vez, no soy lo que me ocurrió, soy lo que elijo ser. Y esa es la declaración de vida del empath convertido en alquimista. Ya no se define por el pasado, ni teme al futuro. Vive en el presente como símbolo de integridad donde el alma y el mundo respiran al unísono. Y cuando los miras a esos empaths que han regresado, percibes algo difícil de describir. Una paz con peso. No es débil, sino profunda y firme, como raíces que tocan el corazón de la tierra. Es una paz que no puede ser arrebatada porque no proviene del exterior. En el silencio final del viaje, el empath sonríe suavemente. Ya no hay nada que demostrar, ni a nadie que convencer. Solo un susurro silencioso. No los destruiste, solo dejaste de destruirte a ti mismo. Y en ese silencio, el universo finalmente se equilibró. Cierra los ojos, respira hondo, y en ese instante el mundo, la oscuridad, la luz, el amor y el dolor se funden en uno solo. Ya no hay empath ni narcisista, solo el alma, en su estado de totalidad. Y el viaje termina donde comenzó, en el espejo. Pero esta vez cuando mira dentro ya no ve a otro, solo se ve a sí mismo. Y si tú aún estás aquí, escuchando estas palabras, no es casualidad. Tu alma eligió quedarse hasta el final para presenciar su propio renacimiento. Todo lo que has atravesado, el encanto, la ruptura, el silencio, la oscuridad y la resurrección, no es solo tu historia. Es la historia de todas las almas que están aprendiendo a regresar a casa. Alguna vez creímos que la luz estaba al otro lado de la oscuridad, pero ahora sabes, la luz nunca se fue. Siempre estuvo allí esperando que abrieras los ojos, que dejaras de huir, que aceptaras que incluso la herida forma parte del camino. Recuerda esto, nadie vino a destruirte, nadie fue enviado para herirte, solo vinieron a revelar las partes de ti que ya estaban listas para ser vistas. Y cuando esa misión se cumple, desaparecen como la noche que se retira ante el amanecer. No perdiste, solo superaste a tu antiguo yo. No perdiste a nadie, solo dejaste de perderte a ti mismo. Este camino no es para los débiles, es para las almas valientes que se atreven a mirar el abismo interior, a dejar que el ego se disuelva, a caminar por la noche oscura sin necesitar una mano que las guíe. Y por eso, eres un sobreviviente sagrado, no porque luchaste, sino porque aceptaste. Ahora ya no necesitas huir de la oscuridad ni perseguir la luz, porque eres ambas. La oscuridad te enseña humildad, la luz te enseña presencia, y cuando ambas se unen, tu alma se convierte en oro. Respira profundamente y exhala lentamente. Siente tu cuerpo en paz, quieto, abierto. Siente tu corazón ligero como el viento, brillante como el agua, firme como la tierra. Siente que estás sentado en el centro de un universo que ya está en equilibrio. Ya no necesitas que nadie defina tu valor. Ya no necesitas reflejo alguno para saber que existes, porque te has convertido en el espejo que se ilumina a sí mismo. Y si alguien te preguntara ahora, ¿quién eres? Podrías sonreír y responder, soy la luz que atravesó la oscuridad. Soy la paz que atravesó la tormenta. Soy el alma que ha recordado quién es. No intentes aferrarte a nada. Deja que todo sea. Deja que la vida fluya y tú solo preséntate, agradece y permanece en silencio. Porque a veces no es la luz la que rompe la oscuridad, sino la oscuridad la que abre el camino para que la luz regrese.